Hello friends, this is Worm, and I wanted to talk about Destiny 2 difficulty today because this is a little bit of a dynamic topic. Now this was brought to us by a viewer, Anchor, shout out to you buddy, and he wants our opinions basically on difficulty in Destiny 2 because very few people are talking about it. So I did some research, and yeah, difficulty in Destiny 2 is not widely discussed amongst the community, and I'm not really sure why. I think it's probably because Destiny's existed for so long that the community just kind of accepts the difficulty of Destiny 2 the way that it is. But I don't think that Destiny 2's difficulty is in the best possible spot. And so today we're going to talk about the different degrees of difficulty inside of just video games in general, and maybe some changes that Bungie can make to implement these, this difficulty level. But of course, my opinion, there are three types of difficulty that are present in video games. First one is going to be challenge, the second one is going to be toughness, and the third one is going to be tediousness. Now, out of those three, you could probably pick which one or two Destiny 2 kind of fills the most. That's toughness and tediousness. What Destiny 2 does in terms of its difficulty is it scales the player's power level down and it scales the enemy power level up. So if you go into a regular Nightfall, just a base tier match made Nightfall, you're going to find the enemies pretty easy to kill, not too tough. They hit a little bit harder than regular strikes, but they're not anything crazy tough. It's pretty easy to clear one of these Nightfalls in, sub 10 minutes probably. Then you go up in difficulty, you go to expert, you go to master, then you get to grandmaster. And by the time you get to grandmaster, things have slowed down quite a bit because enemies, they hit a lot harder and they have a lot more health. And I don't think it's that the enemies have more health, it's that the player's dealing kind of less damage to them, although they probably do have some health scalers in there as well. And really, this is one of those things that's players yeah, it's cool at first. If I was a brand new player and I'd never touched a Grandmaster Nightfall and I went in and I did a Grandmaster Nightfall, it would feel fun. It would feel like an accomplishment. It would feel difficult, but it would, it's something I would take my time with, fighting through each area, trying to play it safe, so on and so forth, until I get to the boss, kill the boss. Oh man, I got this huge sigh of relief. Oh, I finished with it. I did it. I did a Grandmaster. Yeehaw, I'm super excited, stuff like that. But as hardcore players, this just feels kind of like a slog, right? Because whenever we are playing the game and we're just the only thing that's different between a Grandmaster and a regular Nightfall is enemy difficulty basically. And yeah, there's some modifiers too, and we'll talk about the modifiers in just a second. But enemy difficulty, that just slows it down. I don't know about y'all, but primarily when I'm doing Grandmaster content, I find myself with a long range weapon on, staying in safe places, kind of slowly picking off enemies, taking down champions and stuff like that. And that's just not really a fun or an engaging play style, and we even see nowadays that players are optimizing their Grandmaster runs. How fast can you complete this Grandmaster? Can you get a sub 10 minute run, sub 12 minute? There are builds and stuff that you can use to push through this content with relative ease. I'm not saying it's a cakewalk, but relative ease. And I think that in terms of Destiny 2's difficulty, we've kind of ascended to a point where the enemy's overall health and the amount of damage that we're doing is not really something that's impacting our gameplay outside of just making it more tedious or just making things a little bit tougher. Again, toughness and tediousness, which are the two categories I think Destiny kind of touches on the most, aren't really the way to go. In my opinion, when it comes to difficulty, one of the best things you do is actually present challenge. And there are a couple of different ways that we can implement challenge in Destiny 2 and that Bungie has done. And one of the biggest ways of implementing challenge is in raids and in puzzle encounters. And these really are wonderful. This is one of the reasons why I praise raids and I praise dungeons so highly, is because a lot of these all of these activities, it's not so much that they're hard because they're overwhelming ads or the boss is hard. It's more difficult because there's mechanics involved. Think of something like Verity, for example. Verity from Salvation's Edge. That is probably one of the most difficult raid encounters, not because it's necessarily hard, but because there's so much going on. You have to be able to remember so much, triangle, circle, square. Okay, what does it mean if somebody has triangle and circle? What does it mean if I have circle and square? What does all this different stuff mean? You just gotta start putting it together. Then on top of that, you have to remember what everybody looks like. I gotta remember, this warlock has Nezarec's helmet on. This Titan has a, whatever, Helm of Saint 14 or whatever it is, so there's a lot of layers to the difficulty, but it's not brought in through just here's a bunch of enemies with high health that do more damage to you. It's brought in by, hey, here's a bunch of new mechanics that you have to learn and kind of juggle in your mind, basically. And I think that is a really good way to go. That's why I like raids. That's why I like dungeons, and even some of the exotic missions and stuff we have. They're more puzzles than anything else. Like, these are good levels of content, but I think that Bungie could potentially take it up a notch by making it not so much about just puzzles, but actually increasing the overall challenge of a Nightfall. And one of the things, there's kind of two things that come to mind for me. Okay, the first one is Call of Duty. Okay, and in Call of Duty's campaign mode, you have multiple difficulties that you can select. You can start out, I think, recruit or regular, something like that, and you work all the way up to like veteran. I don't remember the exact names of them because I haven't played Call of Duty in a long time, but there's multiple different levels, and each of those levels that you're going up, like, yes, the enemies get a little bit tougher, you take a little bit more damage, but primarily enemy AI evolves as you go up in difficulty. No longer are the enemies, just kind of shooting around you and stuff, and just kind of shooting in your general direction. But now by the time you hit veteran, like, they are aiming spot on at you. Like, you've got to be careful. And it makes me wonder if Bungie implemented something like this for Destiny 2. If Bungie implemented an AI overhaul in terms of difficulty, how much more interesting would it be? How much more interesting would it be if, we're doing a Nightfall and we're sitting at the very back and the enemies know where we are, so they start pushing in on us and requiring us to, have something to handle them at close ranges. Have an auto rifle, submachine gun, something like that. And I think that if Bungie were to go this route with, updating the enemy AI to make it more challenging inside of Destiny 2's in-game content, they wouldn't necessarily need so much of the the stronger enemies and weaker guardian stuff. I think that deficit would still need to be balanced out. I don't think that we could have a Grandmaster where we have the same power as in a normal Nightfall, but just enemies have better AI. I'm thinking that still have that difficulty, but we don't need it to be up to a point where it's like, oh, snipers are basically gonna one-shot us now. So now we have to play back and just play slow and tedious so that we don't die in this Grandmaster Nightfall. And I think that'd be really cool. And also, I think if you went this route by increasing, changing, not increasing, but changing the enemy's AI, it would force Guardians to learn new tactics. Okay, and this is something that players have, kind of been in a stalemate about for years now is, enemy AI, it's all the same. You're doing, Nightfall strikes. It's the same thing every time. You know where the champions are going to spawn. You know where enemies are going to spawn. You know where they're typically going to go. You know how they're going to attack, stuff like that. And it becomes like a memorization of how is the battlefield going to happen. Okay, how are the enemies going to spawn and all this stuff. And if you change up enemy AI, so the enemies aren't constantly doing the same things. When a wizard comes out, instead of just coming out and starting attacking, maybe the wizard, yurts across the battlefield, to a different spot, to an angle where it can attack you from. But if you push out of cover, you've got all these enemies on the front. Enemies could start doing flushes and stuff like that. And it would require players to just play a little bit more conscientiously. And again, increasing the enemy's AI so that, okay, we're going to have a different battle tactic. We're going to have actual strategy now. The Cabal are strategists. So why are we not seeing, strategy movements? Why are we not seeing, phalanxes line up together and start pushing in on us with their shields up and enemies behind them or something like that? And I know this is probably a lot of code writing, to overwrite enemy AI because of where it is currently, but it is a possibility. It is an option that Bungie could do, and I think it would do a lot of good for the game to actually increase enemies AI and basically the way that they think and the way that they perform on the battlefield. And again, I don't think you need to do this at all levels of content. You know, just as you climb up in difficulty, you know, the difference between a raid and a master raid is, you know, the enemy AI, how they think, how they move around the battlefield, how they operate. I think also an aspect that you can do is, you know, in Destiny 2, most PvE enemies projectiles are or the weapons they shoot are projectile based. You know, when a wizard's shooting at you, you can see that it's shooting at you and you can jump out of the way and you can move out of the way, right? If a knight is shooting a boomer at you, you can literally watch that bullet and you can look up and say, okay, here it comes. I'm going to move to the left right now, move to the left, and it doesn't even hit you. And yes, I do feel like in Grandmaster content, the enemies like aim and their AI and stuff like that, they do improve slightly, you know, because like if you're moving at, you know, too straight towards the enemy, you know, you got an enemy straight up ahead of you and you're moving close to it, you know, it can snipe you out of the air. But I think that improving the AI and the trajectories so that there are calculations being done so that regular old enemies can say, okay, like this guardian's gonna fly up in the air, I'm gonna shoot him, and I'm gonna calculate exactly where I need to be shooting so that when I shoot, if they continue on that, you know, flying through the air in that direction, or if they continue running in that direction, these attacks are going to hit, right? That would definitely change the battlefield up, because then it's like, okay, enemies are now a lot more accurate, their aim is a lot better, you know. And again, you could reduce the amount of damage that guardians are taking. Of course, I think that it would be nightmarish to have enemies that don't miss shots and have the same like Grandmaster level deficit. Like that'd be just too much, quite frankly. You know, so you could reduce the amount of damage that guardians are taking, but it's still something that is like risky, you know, moving from place to place, cover to cover, you know, so on and so forth. That's just, you know, another idea that I think Bungie could potentially do with, you know, enemy AI. But yeah, in terms of just general Destiny 2 difficulty, like that's kind of my thoughts on, like, the difficulty is just, it's kind of boring now. It's just like, okay, you're going to throw us in a situation where we're going to be under leveled and there's going to be modifiers. And modifiers, don't get me wrong, I like modifiers. Like they definitely modify the battlefield. For example, grounded. The grounded is a modifier where if your guardian's in the air, they're taking additional damage. Like that is like modifiers are definitely a good like direction to go, right? Because obviously, you know, just increasing difficulty is, or increasing the toughness of enemies and the strength of guardians, or decreasing the strength of guardians, I guess I should say, is really boring. So the modifiers do kind of throw a mixture of different stuff in there, you know. Oh, vandals now drop those the web mines, you know, or acolytes drop fire pits at their feet, or, you know, whatever. Like, I think those are good, but I really think that just improving the enemy's overall AI would be a tremendous step in the right direction. And maybe Bungie could do some sort of testing, you know, just take like one really simple strike and just rewrite all the enemy's AI in that strike, you know, and then give it to players to test out to see, hey, like, how are people feeling about, you know, enemies' ability to hit shots and enemies making, you know, intelligent plays on the battlefield and stuff like that. I think that it would also, you know, in terms of difficulty, it would also be better if, I don't know how they would do this, but if enemies like kind of, you know, scattered about, like, you know, in most Nightfalls and stuff, enemies are just in tight little groups. You can throw a grenade, you can throw a super in one specific spot, and enemies just literally walk into it and they die to it, right? Like, imagine if enemies like spawns were just spread out, or when enemies did spawn, they split off like really, really hard in different directions. You know, if there was a doorway that they come out of, instead of coming out the doorway straight and then running kind of maybe at a little bit of an angle, imagine if they came out the door and immediately took a hard right or a hard left, or, you know, a 45-degree right angle, or a, you know, a 60-degree right angle, or something like that. Like, just breaking the enemies up so that they're more spread out, and then have them move around us. And in some strikes, in some situations, like what was the Exodus Black, or Exodus Black, I can't remember what the name of the strike is, but it's the one that, you know, we got to go on the Exodus, Crash Exodus ship. Exodus Down, I think is what it is. But anyways, that particular strike, like the enemies in that second like room where you have to let the ghost decrypt his thing and whatever, like, yeah, they spread out, they'll go kind of behind you. Like, that's kind of more of what I would like to see, so that it's not so much about, okay, like, you know, hunker down, like take cover or find a safe spot to sit. It's more about, okay, like, let's manage the battlefield. You know, let's manage, okay, where are these certain enemies coming from? Where are these guys going? Then you'd have to have more conversation with your team, because you have one person, hey, I need you to watch our flank because the enemies are going to try to move around behind us, and then I'll watch the front, and then we can have, you know, our third guy up somewhere higher. He's kind of our overwatch. He's the one that's going to kill snipers and blah, 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 blah. Because right now, like, I mean, I can fill all three of those roles just fine. Like, I don't need, you know, teammates to help me in these situations. Teammates make it easier and make it better. But yeah, I just think that the tediousness and the toughness, like, it gets old, especially the tediousness, especially just, hey, we're going to make it take longer because there's just higher health targets. That's not fun. That's boring. But yeah, those are my thoughts on you know, difficulty in Destiny 2. That's one of the things I would love to see Bungie do, is just change enemy AI so that it's a little bit better. But tell me your thoughts on Destiny 2's difficulty, and tell me your thoughts on what you think. I think. And yeah, that's it for me. Do me a favor, like the videos, helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content, conversations, debates, discussions, all that good stuff. And do me one more favor, watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason YouTube thinks you'll like them. See you next time, guys. Bye for now.